Are you gay?
How you gonna ask me a question like that?
Alright, I've seen enough. Byler is out of control. Now, I want to start this with a disclaimer. I think it's great if people want to have ships, go ahead. That alone isn't a problem. And understand, I'm not talking about all Byler fans. I've come across some measured reactions and reasonable complaints that raise fair questions and make sense. For example, some folks pointed out that it had been nice to know if Will became a painter or not. That's a good observation. But there is a certain section of this particular fan base that is so loud and has overtaken a lot of the discussion. That's who I'm going to be talking about, okay? If what I'm describing in this video doesn't apply to you, then I'm not talking about you.
And it's just that simple.
With all that said, these people have become addicted to social media and let it overtake their brains. It's horrible. They throw around pop psychology terms non-stop that they 100% learn from TikTok and don't even use them correctly. Everything is gaslighting, everything is narcissism, everything is about validation and triggers and emotional labor, and they don't even know what these terms actually mean, okay? They keep creating scenarios in their heads and then getting mad about it. They're like, the Duffers are homophobic, this is queer baiting. And don't worry, I'm gonna counter all of these arguments. But first of all, I want to start by acknowledging the humanity of these people. Clearly something's off to attach your entire existence to a ship. This is not something that people who aren't hurting in some way do. On a fundamental human level, I get that, alright? They invested in this ship for 10 years, believed in it so hard, they desperately wanted it to be real, but it got out of hand. People started trying to vicariously live through this fictional romance that doesn't even exist in the fictional story. It's literally an example of confirmation bias, and I'll explain why. When you start looking for something, you'll see it everywhere. Everything is a conspiracy when you're this obsessed. They claim there's a mountain of evidence, but it's almost always an Olympic level stretch. For example, they often cite two scenes from season 4. The first one being when Elle is talking to Mike and she's like, "You never say I love you," and he's like, "I say it." And then later on when Mike's talking to Will and he says something like, "Thanks for talking me down earlier, I was being a jerk." And Will is like, "I didn't say anything," and Mike goes, "You didn't have to." So yeah, Mike being a whack boyfriend isn't because he's insecure and thinks Elle's gonna leave him one day, it's because he's secretly gay for Will. There's a scene in season 1 where Karen tells Mike she doesn't want him to hide things from her, and that apparently means he's secretly gay for Will. Or the scene in Surfer Boy Pizza when Argyle says the iconic line, "Try before you deny." Yeah, it turns out that was like a super coded message that Mike is secretly gay for Will. Basically everything means Mike is secretly gay for Will. Alright, I'm gonna shelve the sarcasm. Now, to be fair, for a couple of these I honestly can see why they read into it, but I assure you, the Duffers are not this sophisticated, okay? They don't have the skill set for the kind of subtle, layered writing that Byler fans keep looking for. You guys are giving them entirely too much credit. And they know this. They've literally said more than once that subtlety isn't their style. Yeah, this is kind of a whole other thing, but just in general, the Duffers kind of suck at their jobs, I'm sorry. And I love this show, man. They're better than Scott Cawthon, but only by about 2 levels. I'm giving it to you real. Regardless, they clearly don't have a problem making queer characters. This, coupled with their on-the-nose writing style, means that if Mike was queer, it would have been addressed. But Byler fans refuse to accept it, going as far as to make stuff up. I kept hearing about some 2.5 hours that allegedly was cut from season 5, and there was a really intimate scene between Mike and Will set to a licensed song. And dude, I looked all over the place. There was no evidence for this. In none of the panels or interviews on the season 5 press tour, nobody says anything like this. Some weirdo on social media just made it up and spread it around, and now people believe it. It's very strange. I understand and sympathize with the frustration. There simply aren't as many gay characters, and that lack of representation makes you feel it more when certain things happen to queer characters. And I'm in no way ignorant to the history of the Hays Code and things like that. At the same time though, this is not healthy. It's just not. It's literally not good for you, being so obsessed with a ship that you take Mike not being gay for Will as an attack on you personally. But another thing is, queerbaiting gets thrown around a lot, and honestly it's a slap in the face to actual examples of queerbaiting. Heck, I remember when Nicki Minaj presented herself as bisexual in lyrics and interviews, only to quickly walk it back like, actually I'm not, I just wanted to generate buzz. Even as a kid back then, I was like, this is stupid, what is wrong with you? That was queerbaiting. Now, queerbaiting in fictional media typically involves one or more of these elements. 1. Implying a character's queerness only to default them as straight later. 2. Teasing a queer relationship between straight characters without following through. 3. Teasing a queer relationship between queer and straight characters through ambiguous same-sex moments that imply potential reciprocity through queerness in the straight character without following through. And 4. Doing any of the above with the intent to exploit queer audiences and not just because you want to put queer characters in your story. 1 doesn't occur because Will is still gay. It's not 2 because Will has a boyfriend at the end. It can't be 3 because a romantic relationship between Will and Mike was never teased at all. And 4 doesn't suit because of the 3 reasons I just listed. A lot of the show's issues can be chalked up to the Duffers simply not being good writers, but it's not accurate to call this queerbaiting. Mike has never been shown as anything other than heterosexual. Not even that, the only girl he wants to be with is Elle. This has been the case since season 1. Byler fans drive themselves off a cliff talking about he glanced at Will's lips while they were talking. Like, dude, you guys have lost the plot, I'm sorry. They'll go like, ooh, Mike has Will's painting on the wall. Okay, and he has Elle's picture, what now? They're saying stuff like Mike is gay because he picked an album by the Butthole Surfers, and this is honestly where I start to side with them, but not for the reasons you might think. In all honesty, I don't personally think the writing team were doing this to hint at Byler. Let's use some logic here. This band wasn't even very popular in the 80s, especially if we're talking about a random small town in the Midwest. This genuinely comes off like the Duffers just name dropping a relatively obscure band for the time to get a lighthearted scene out of it. However, they did seem oblivious to how a certain corner of the fan base might interpret it. I personally don't think authors need to alter their work just because some fans are weird, but at the same time, I honestly get why the Byler fanatics read into this. The only other time I side with them is in the series finale when Mike says, "Friends? No thanks." And then there's that pause and he goes, "Best friends." I was like, ooh, they did them dirty. That genuinely felt like a middle finger to Byler fans. Given how obsessed the Duffers are with callbacks, I do believe the intent here was simply echoing the other times Mike calls Will his best friend, but it seems like they're just so out of touch they fail to realize how tone deaf this dialogue would be. They could have just had Mike smile and nod and say best friends. That would have done the job. Byler clearly was never going to happen, and I stand by my statements that way too many of its fans are delusional and need to spend less time on the internet, but that was foul, dude. I don't want to harp on this too much, but let me read you an excerpt from an interview with Noah Schnapp. They have that conversation, which was actually written. It was not originally in the script, but I had the Duffers included. I felt like there wasn't enough closure between Will and Mike. The coming out scene was so focused on Will's feelings that there wasn't time for them to have a separate conversation, so I just felt like it was necessary for them to close out their specific chapter together. And this is what the Duffers came up with. Yeah, I don't blame Byler fans for being mad about this one. Again, the ship was never gonna be canon, but they should have put a little more time and effort into this exchange. That was whack. The last thing I want to talk about is people claiming the ending means gay people don't deserve love. It's preposterous how the message people have chosen to take is that a gay character having a crush on a straight friend means queer people have to accept being alone. This is so stupid. First of all, Will is with a guy at the end. He has someone now. He's literally not alone. What you're communicating is that you don't actually care about Will's happiness.
I don't care if he finally found love. It has to be Mike.
Why? What is wrong with you? The outrage over Byler not being canon is sheer selfishness and delusion, with a weak attempt to make it a moral argument by pretending it's about gay rights. Let me state once more, there are regular people who just like the ship. That's not who I'm talking about. I'm talking about the ones who convinced themselves this totally was gonna happen and invested their whole life and psychological well-being into it. Will not getting with Mike doesn't mean gay people are unworthy of love. That makes no sense. And honestly, that's a toxic outlook. That if you have a crush on someone, they have to like you back or else you're worthless. Will, honestly, at this point, is my favorite character, but that doesn't mean that I have to convince myself that Mike is gay. Will doesn't need Mike in order to be happy. Not to mention, Mike isn't even that great of a boyfriend. His relationship with Elle was primarily rooted in what he wanted. Will deserves better than Mike. I want to end with this message to the Byler fans. I know I've been critical and harsh throughout this video, so if you didn't even watch this far, I get it. But understand, I don't hate you guys. I'm just very annoyed and concerned right now. I get it. This ship wasn't just about characters for a lot of you. It's not lost on me that many of you probably relate to Will's struggle, and I see it could be reasonably argued that his bond with Mike is stronger than Elle's. Mike and Elle didn't even feel like a couple in 4 and 5, and I was never exceptionally invested in their relationship, so at the very least, just know I'm not some butthurt my 11 fan. And while I'm sure certain people won't get anything out of this other than Green Rice hates gay people, I'm not trying to reach them. They're already too far gone. But check this out. In the end, Will got his happy ending, and as someone who loves this character and cares about his journey, that was very gratifying to see. It doesn't have to be with Mike. Mike isn't gay, he's just not. Still, the show didn't erase Will's queerness. He was never a box tick character, and his arc ended with love, self-acceptance, and a positive outlook on the future. He's no longer defined by unrequited love, he's free of those chains. As far as I'm aware, Byler is the most popular ship in the fandom. The emotional investment and creations you guys have made don't instantly vanish because the show didn't make it canon. I implore you guys to not allow a ship to determine your self-worth and happiness. The story may not have given us Byler, but it gave us something pretty real nonetheless. Not to mention, there are many stories out there with even better representation for a character like Will. By better writers, just saying.